So here's what I'd like to know today, and that's what makes for happiness. What makes you happy?
I just love being a part of something bigger, I guess, than myself, in a way. And I think also the beauty is in the unknown, you know?
Yeah.
Like there's a certain excitement in not knowing what's gonna happen, you know? I mean, obviously, there's a huge amount of stress involved depending on what it is, you know, but pushing all that aside, I think amongst all that, there's always just a little bit of excitement.
I think once you're able to find that freedom and that joy in the unknown, like that's when you find true happiness, I think, because you're never going to be completely like, your life could change any minute. Like, we're not in control of our lives, really. And so once we can be content in just living life and like finding adventure in the unknown, then that's when I think we can be happy.
I'm a little surprised, I suppose, that we haven't hit on anything like money or success.
Oh man, I'm really about living comfortably, you know, modestly. You know, I had dreams as a kid that I would be a millionaire or really, really wealthy and buy my family houses and cars and donate my money to nonprofits, you know.
It's so hard seeing all these commercials, all these billboards.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's like wanting to buy stuff. I've seen interviews with celebrities who accomplish everything they want in their life, all the money, they can buy anything they want, and they still say they're not happy, they don't feel fulfilled. And they don't know what they're missing, they don't know all those connections.
I would like to say that just enough to get by is good for me. But, you know, I don't really know if that's going to be the case or not, you know. I think everyone's always going to want a little bit more than they need.
What if you don't have enough and you can't pay the rent and Starbucks coffee is whatever it is? You've got college loans. Yeah. They don't care if you're happy or not. They show up with the payment slip.
Yeah, it's really hard to be happy then. You're just constantly worried about bills and like how I'm going to pay this. You can't really concentrate on other things and you're just worried and worried.
Would that make a difference to your happiness to pull in $60,000 a year?
Yeah, I mean, it would pay for.
It would change a lot.
It would pay for like opportunity.
Yeah, and money. I don't believe money buys happiness, but I feel like it does drive a lot of, I guess, social situations. Because I've been in the place before where I couldn't really be spending $5 on a cup of coffee, right? And then I have friends that are like, oh yeah, let's go out, let's go meet for coffee this place. I'm like, I'm good, guys. I'll pass. And it's like I just can't.
You don't believe that money buys happiness? Well, wouldn't it make you happy to buy a Starbucks coffee?
Oh.
Also, would you lose that connection if you continued to say no?
It does drive a huge importance on, I guess, social situations. You know, going out, socializing with people.
What about relationships and romance and love? How important is love?
I think to have that like undying support from a whole other being is so incredible. It's really important to have that kind of support, but I wouldn't say you need that per se. It adds so much to your life.
But like you said, it's not necessary. It's a fantastic thing to have, you know, to find your person, you know what I mean? So that's fantastic, and it really does help with happiness, of course.
So it sounds a bit like, if you could have it, that'd be the best thing to make you happy. But if it goes wrong, then that's going to threaten your happiness. You could be too involved, you could be too much this, too much that. And so happiness is connected in some way to not being wounded.
Any relationship is a risk. You have to weigh out, like, what do you want in a relationship? Are you willing to go through that risk to get that happiness out of it? Or are you just going to be afraid and push it back?
Live in your hole.
Is there happiness without risk? Friendships, we sort of talked about friendships as if they're safe, but friendships are not just inherently safe. And so one question would be something like, can you be happy if you don't risk?
No. No, it's just, I'm sorry. I mean, like, no, you can't.
No, that's...
Honestly, you can't. Just like going out even if you look at the basics of what people do in daily lives, going out for a job, that's a risk because you can get rejected. Going to drive to work is a risk because you can get in an accident. Every single thing that you do is a risk. Even if you do stay at home, that's still technically a risk because your house could catch on fire. So,
All right.
But then again, if you just stay at home and hermitize and do absolutely nothing with your day, you're not living.
It's been an interesting conversation, and I'd like to share a little bit with you about how I've come to experience some happiness in my life and how pervasively it goes against what I thought I was looking for. And to tell you about that, I need to tell you a love story. On literally the first day of college, I was standing in line with some friends from high school that had gone to high school with me, and I looked ahead at this orientation event and saw at a table passing out name tags this absolutely beautiful girl. She had dark hair and dark eyes and dark olive skin and a radiant smile. And I looked at her and I turned to these friends and I said, "You see that girl up there? I'm going to marry her." Now, another truth is that it took her a little longer to come around to the idea that this is the way things ought to go. But she did eventually come around. And so we decided over the course of the next year that we would get married as soon as possible. So I finished school a year early so that we could do that. And we were married in 1996. And we just loved being married. And we were so happy. And then after several years in New Jersey, we moved back to North Carolina. And our son was born, and there we were. We were still very much in love. We would still, when we'd get a chance to have a cup of coffee and could afford one, we'd hold hands, sit on the same side of the booth, and we would say to each other, "We're so happy." I mean, we were so lucky. How could life have turned out this way thus far? And then she began to get sick, and that began our transformation and our transition really into an entirely different world. And we were scared. We were young, we had a child, and I had no job. I was still in graduate school, and something was badly wrong with her. And eventually they did discover what she had, and so we got the news. And the news was that her disease was extremely rare, it was chronic, it was progressive, and it was untreatable. And it would advance slowly in a kind of withering process until at some point it would become too much for her. And she would, either by exhaustion or by catching a virus, give out. And it has been now a dozen years. And the road that we've traveled has been long and cruel and hard, filled with disability and medication and a profound but unavoidable isolation. Now we're pretty much at the end. And we don't want to be here. We are filled, in fact, with grief. And yet, we have come to know a beauty and a love and a happiness that is deeper and more real and richer and more exquisite than anything we could have imagined. Here's the strange thing. That happiness is something that we could not have experienced without going down the road of withering and suffering and decline and loss. And as I've thought about our love story and this question of what it takes to be happy, I think we've learned some things. Happiness is the work of a lifetime. It is much more like a skill or like a set of habits that you would develop over the course of your life and in your journey than it is like a destination or a permanent state. Happiness is also, I think, connected to hope. Nothing quite kills your happiness like hopelessness. If you look at human life, and especially death, and its power over all of us and all that we love and cherish, your chance at happiness is pretty close to zero. So then for us, Our love story has become also a story of our own experience of happiness, because we've found that it is part of a much grander story of hope. And for us, that larger story has been really the pattern of the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. We have discovered, in an unsentimental way, that the pattern of that crucifixion and resurrection turns out to be the pattern of our happiness. We're actually headed toward death. There's blessing on that path. It's not as if there's no blessing. There's immense blessing. But then there is a real death. And there is a real separation. And there is a real grief. And there is a real moment of finality and wreckage. And then there is the sure and certain hope of resurrection from the dead, where the last words are not death and defeat and absence, but life and victory and reunion. So here's the thing about happiness. All imitations of it will flee when real suffering and death arrive. What's really needed is a happiness that is stronger than death. And I want to tell you that it does exist. So there is a love story that continues on past death. And that's what I hope you'll find. That's our story.